This is a Facebook Live video Andrew and I did on men's non-verbal communication. Whilst we're very capable of communicating non-verbally, we need to deepen our awareness to the emotional underpinnings. In this video, there will be tips and hints on how to deepen your levels of awareness to your non-verbal communication, and I hope you really enjoy it and gain something from it. We're about to do another Facebook Live. We're just waiting on Andrew to come on board. Tonight we will be looking at exploring a bit more of the non-verbal communication that we spoke about last week. In the conversation last week, Andrew made the point that we men are capable of doing it. Andrew wants to be in your video. Brilliant. How do I approve? Okay. Hi Shay, it's wonderful to see you. Thank you for watching. Hey mate, how are you going?
Yeah, good Mark, how are you?
All right mate. Non-verbal communication tonight again, mate. Oh, thereabout. Yeah. How do we do it? Last week we talked about, or you mentioned that yes, we men are capable. I'm just going to start the recording, so we've got a digital record of it. So welcome to Men's Heart of Advice. Sounds like, to me, Men's Heart of Advice is where it should be at.
Okay.
How do we men get involved, get to that level? Hi Trish Cook, good to see you. Haven't seen you for a while. Last week you mentioned that men are capable of, have a look back in the, that men are capable of non-verbal communication. And Marie, bless a shout out to Marie. Marie, in the comments, she agreed with what you were saying about men's capability. And then she mentioned that it depends on the level of awareness that men may hold to, which may facilitate the level of accessibility to the underlying energy in the non-verbal communication. Today in the research I was doing it, if I can just quote a thing, that non-verbal communication may also be conscious and unconscious. Facial expressions are particularly hard to control because we cannot see ourselves to know what we're doing. We may therefore complicate communication by trying to convey one message consciously while in fact conveying quite another unconsciously. A lot of the non-verbal communication can be conscious, but a lot of it can be unconscious. And I'm just wondering, how do we men become a bit more aware of what the unconscious energy is that we're holding in our bodies, that's being expressed in our facial expressions, that we are not necessarily conscious of, but perhaps our partners or friends or colleagues can be witnessing. Any points of view on that, or any connections on that?
So we're all guilty of sending mixed messages in our communication, and that's something I think we're all familiar with. We've all done it, and we're probably all going to keep doing it at some point in the future. It's a big question. How do we become aware of the non-verbal communication, the signals we're sending? What's the why to that? Why should we become aware of that? Is it to enhance communication? Is it to communicate more authentically? Is it so that our conscious
Yeah.
desires and unconscious urges can connect somehow and find some sort of peace and coexistence.
Yeah, for me, it's all about connection because, you know, even when you're talking about resolving it,
Yeah.
I would imagine energetically that creates for both of us an energetic connection when we're, you know, when my non-verbals are kicking in, my facial expressions are not matching my non-verbals. You know, what impact does that have then on the connection I have to the other person? And I'm wondering whether a lot of our non-verbal communication is at a deeper level within ourselves, that we're perhaps at a feeling level, perhaps at an emotional level, that we're not really that well tuned into, perhaps. One of the things I believe that we men are fairly tuned into is our anger as a reaction, a protective mechanism. Yes, okay, that may then trigger our reptilian brain, and that can be habitual. However, you know, someone said to me recently that the reptilian brain, the software that we've got in our reptilian brain, is about 8,000 years out of date,
Yeah.
which is a really good. And it's how do we move? You know, how do we men learn to develop an awareness of the subtle nuances that our body, our being may hold. And if we are more aware of that, I'm wondering whether we've then got the better capacity to communicate differently. You know, that a lot of that not, yeah, go on.
That possibility then is about communicating more authentically.
Yeah, good point. Yep.
Yeah. So it's about authentic communication. You mentioned one thing men might connect to easily is anger. I think that we connect with our thoughts pretty easily too.
The rational logical mind, 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah. Yep.
But it might be 1 + 1 = 2 in our head. But what's going on in our bodies? Is the 1 and 1 equaling 2 inside our bodies? And what are the indicators within our bodies, in our body, to let us know? And I wonder whether we forego that energetic connection in preference to come up into our rational, logical mind and expressing communication not, at a conscious level that's opposite to what, or contrary to what we're actually feeling.
Yeah, and so remaining identified with the intellect is a way of keeping safe. But if it's not authentic communication, then it's not going to be received well.
And how often are our colleagues, friends, and our partners picking up the subtle nuances of the non-authentic? Yeah, we are being authentic at one level, but could we then at another level be non-authentic, not disingenuous, but yeah, it's not, do you know what I mean? It's not matching, it just isn't matching the the words that are coming out of our mouth.
Yeah, it's the words that are coming out are not matching what's being embodied. And what's being embodied is being communicated powerfully to everybody around us. Now, whether those people are consciously aware of it or not, you know, we talked about the brain earlier. The brain is quick. It's a fast computer. There are micro postures, micro expressions that flit across the face below conscious recognition. And people can read that, people pick it up, and they'll have a felt response to that as well. So when we're not authentic, people may not respond by naming that up, but they'll have a sense that something's not quite right.
As you're sharing that, what's going through my consciousness is, when you've been talking about authentic, what's been sitting in my mind is, how then can I be more authentic with what's going on inside my being.
Yep.
You know, yes, the reptilian brain is very quick to respond. We needed to back, 80 a million years ago. If you grunted emotionally at me, mate, I'd go, thanks, Andrew. I'll see you later. I'm out. You're gobbled up. Thanks, brother. I love you for it. I'll see you next lifetime, so to speak. And I'm wondering how, if we're more authentic, are we then able to capture before the reptilian brain kicks in? I've read, I don't know whether this is, I'm quoting it for verbatim, but my understanding is the reptilian brain and the mammalian brain are about 400 times stronger than the neurocortex, the grey matter.
The frontal.
And now we're different. We've got that prefrontal cortex, which is the brain's brain. But if we can be authentic with ourselves and our own feelings, our own emotions, the own energy within our bodies, does that put us in a better capacity to communicate better non-verbally?
Absolutely, I believe it does, because we're being wholly present to what's happening in that moment. And the question that you raised earlier, how do we become more aware of the way that we're communicating or how we are? It caused me to have a kind of response.
Yeah, go on, do tell.
Yeah.
Fess up. Come on.
Yeah. Which was, okay, I use myself as an example here. How can I be more aware of my embodied communication without becoming neurotic about it? Okay, so we can do things, as you know, we can meditate, we can do body scans, we can check through our body, we practice talking in the mirror. We can get feedback from other people. Those are all ways of doing it. But I think there's another question we can ask ourselves, which is, rather than what am I saying, what is the content of what I'm saying, who am I being as I say it? Who am I while I'm speaking? Okay, so am I speaking from the voice of the angry child, the angry parent, the narcissist,
the judge, the critic.
Yeah.
So there we're going down down the road of some voice dialogue. I just want to. This is really difficult, guy. What are those dag friendly blue headphones on? I need to have them on to hear that. Maybe I can take them off. No. That's prompted me to take them off. I just need to hear the audio, so for the recording purposes. And I also need them to hear you. Now that, to me, what you've just shared there is recognising those different selves is really, really important. That, to me, is being authentic. Now, you're right that in the different contexts, we're not going to not miscommunicate non-verbally, but with more awareness, I'm wondering whether we can then get access to, hey, the inner child screaming here, or my narcissistic self's coming to the surface, my inner critic, because isn't it so that, correct me if this is not right, that our inner critic is also can be the external judge of others?
Yes.
Is that,
yep. So we criticise inwards and we judge outwardly. And
when we're in situations where I'm just trying to collect my thoughts here, and the sense I'm trying to have to express this is when I'm getting feedback about my non-verbal communication, how much of the time can I be in denial? Because I'm not I'm not necessarily consciously aware of it. it's all written over my face in my facial expressions, but I'm saying, oh, no, that's not right.
Yeah.
And what does it take to reflect and take on board the feedback that our non-verbal communication is generating?
Well, it takes courage. Part of a trusting relationship is taking the risk to listen to another person and take their word for something. And perhaps test that out for ourselves, ask that question inwardly instead of straight away rejecting it. No, you're wrong.
Yep.
You're not listening to me. There's nothing going on. Instead of that, it's we need to introject. So look within. Okay, this person's telling me that I look angry, needy, stressed, whatever it might be. And then simply ask that question for it. Just say, okay, let's just pause for a minute here. I'm going to reflect on what you just said, and is that how I am?
And what happens, what do you experience when we do begin to notice internally, oh, right, that is, wow, I've done a bit of awareness, a bit of insight work, started to recognise, oh yeah, that's the inner child kicking in. Does that then change or increase the depth of our awareness, the level of awareness that Marie was suggesting that men are capable, but depends on the level of awareness?
I believe we're still at the point of choice at that moment when we become aware. So let's just presume we started out being angry. Yeah. And someone said, hey, you're a bit full on, you seem a bit angry. We look within, we go, yeah, I'm pretty angry. And maybe that's the inner child or some other part of us. But, anger likes to be right. So we can easily then look at that and go, yeah, I'm angry and bugger it, I've got a good reason to be. So I'm going to get more fired up. So we're still at a point of choice there, aren't we?
Yeah, and I wanted to have just a comeback or just a curiosity around, does the anger want to be right, or is that the intellect and the cognition wants to be right? Is the anger serving to protect that deeper vulnerability within myself?
Absolutely, that's what it's there for. Yeah, and that's the next question. That's the point of choice, which is, what is my vulnerability in this situation? And if that question doesn't make sense, what is my fear? What is my worry? What is my need? What is my hope? Any of those questions can help point us, to another level of connection with ourselves. And then we've got something to communicate about.
Sorry, man, I've just got to put goggles on. Really.
Now, who do you become when you do that, Mark? Does it make you smarter?
Oh, yeah, it makes me really intellectual. Yeah, I've never been really intellectual, mate. It's like, finally, I can put intellectual glasses on and it changes the those nerdy kids at school with the they always look really intellectual.
Do they hand glasses out at university?
Yeah. One of the comments is really, I think we get, one of the comments online from Lana is that I think we can go into denial. And denial, by the way, is not a river in Egypt. Did you like that joke?
I did. No, never heard that before.
I haven't heard that one. Denial is not a river in Egypt. It's a long river. And I just got to, it's really tough with these, maybe I have to get a magnifying glass to put on the camera. But let's come back to some seriousness around it. But denial is a really strong defense shield too. And it's, when we're getting in touch, as you were talking about the vulnerability and we've still got choices. Yeah. That, to me, takes a level of awareness at an energetic level, at a deeper level, because, yes, when I'm getting angry or reacting with anger, that anger has got its early warning signs deep within the body.
Absolutely.
By the time I'm clenching my fist, or there's an energy of anger in there, which may be coming across in my facial expressions that I'm not necessarily aware of. And getting that feedback, and it's not easy. And how do we stop and reflect? And I'm wondering whether that's something that, as men, yes, we've got the capacity, but have we had the space, that self-reflection space? We might have it after the event, but in the moment, how do we call on that? And how do we create spaces for men to become a bit more self-reflective?
This is one of the benefits of therapy, really, is when you have therapy, or you attend a men's group, or any of those things that are designed to facilitate self-awareness, that over a period of time, instead of recognising the vulnerability a week later,
I like that one. Yep.
Yeah, which for me was pretty true a few years ago. Would take me quite a while. Then it becomes a day later, and then maybe it's an hour later, and we get closer and closer to the moment. And that's the work. That's the challenge, is to bring those learnings into the moment when communication is happening.
So how do we get through denial? Is there's conscious denial, and can there be unconscious denial? Again, I don't know. They're pretty important questions. Because it's like sometimes I'm wondering whether we can see, when we're having that non-verbal communication, I'm wondering whether we can see stuff or experience unconsciously or consciously something that's in somebody else's subconscious, and they're not consciously aware of it. And, it's like we're banging our heads against the brick wall saying, hey, can't you see that? Can't you get that? And vice versa when it comes back at, is there stuff that I'm not fully aware of unconsciously, but my partner or friends can be more aware of that in me? And receiving that feedback is not easy to receive it, because as you were talking before, those selves that you were talking about before, a lot of our selves might be in what Jungian calls the disowned, or into the shadow side of us. I think there's a voice dialogue that called it, labelled it the disowned selves, and Jung called it he termed it the shadow.
Yes.
And it's how do we get in touch with the shadow sides of our personality?
I believe there's a very important first step in all of this.
Yeah.
The shadow is by definition that which is unknown, or unknown to our conscious mind. So those are aspects of ourself that we don't know. You've wondered about how do we deal with denial. Another word for denial could be resistance. Or maybe they sit next to each other. But whether you name it resistance or denial, it's a legitimate energetic state in and of itself. And so beginning to recognise when we're in that state of resistance or denial is a very important first step. Instead of trying to jump around it or dig straight under it, we need to begin to recognise, and it's quite a subtle state of mind, but if we reflect, I'm sure we can think back, and each of us recognise times in our lives where we were denying something that we knew to be true, and there is a palpable feeling that goes along with that, and it's one that's not often named up and talked about.
Are we talking about it tonight? Touching on it? It's
absolutely.
And as we're touching on it, I'm wondering, I'm just sensing for myself, it's like, we're touching on it, and am I yeah, for my sense deep inside, there's a sort of an anxiety, a little bit of an anxiety, a little bit of a nervousness that, yeah, we're touching on stuff that, oh my God, I wish
Oh
we,
yeah,
Scotty, run away. I want to jump back up into my mind. And when you
yeah.
talked about the mind, I was just, the question for me, or what come into my consciousness was, what happens in the heart? The emotional center of the heart, the heart chakra is the emotional center of the being. What is going on in our heart at that time, and how do we as men get more in touch with that?
So the question is, what's happening in our
In that,
heart
yeah,
when we're stuck up in our head?
yeah. Because in the East, in
Anything
the
could be
West,
happening.
we
We
say
anything could be happening. We wouldn't know.
like in the West, we point to the mind in our heads,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering whether um, the heart, or in the East, do you want to tag me? Yeah, do you? It's like, to me, a lot of the early warning signs are in my heart, at that emotional center in my heart chakra, and learning to get in touch with that. That's not easy. I've got to sort of sit with that, because if I'm not being heard by you, or then something's operating inside myself.
Mm.
And
So you've done work though, Mark, haven't you? You've done work to learn to listen to what's happening there. That's been a process, hey?
yeah, it's been a long process, and some people might say I haven't done any work at all, but it's like
Yeah, yeah,
but yeah, I think that the longer I worked on it, the more in tune. There's stuff that I miss, and I think that's, I think you alluded to that earlier, but it's just having that ability to, hey, shit, sorry, that one went through to the keeper and I missed that one. But the more we can have that safe, subtle communication, then I wonder whether that makes it a little bit softer to actually drop in and, just to connect that feeling. Because I think, or feel, that if the more, when you talked before about having the choice, if I've got that early warning sign and noticing I've got that inner awareness, then I've got a more space to choose to go within and connect to what's really hurting inside,
yeah,
and not proceed to anger, or not to generate it into real energy inside, at a facial expression, in my body level, because we're going to, our body does armor up, whether we're conscious, that's that reptilian brain obviously operating,
yeah.
but the body does armor up. And how do, I'd really like to be able to see, through some of the conversations, how can we help, inviting men to explore a little bit deeper, come into their hearts. That's where I really like the name, Men's Heart of Advice. We're really good at mansplaining, as you said last week, but how do we mansplain around the heart and the deeper feelings inside? And does that therefore give us the ability to explore within, start to meet that vulnerability, that pain that sits in there when we're not being heard?
I reckon you've done a great job of stepping aside from the mansplaining approach by framing that as a question. And perhaps that's what we need to do, is start by asking questions, not presuming to have all the answers, which we don't, and wonder about things.
And reflect.
And reflect.
Because wondering, I'm wondering when we're wondering how much the mind and the brain just keeps circulating around trying to find the right answer, when by reflecting and sensing and feeling and just being rather than doing, are we going to get more information? And it might take a day or a couple of days for us to, that's what it was.
Yeah.
And it's how do we take the feedback from others, because they are the mirror to us at some level, to take that on board, reflect, own it, and turn the light on to the shadow side of us, which ain't all that nice sometimes.
Ah.
Because I don't like those bits really coming up.
No, and that's how it is for all of us. And at the same time, if we can see that mirror as a gift and an opportunity, and relationship as a growth opportunity, that's got to be a good starting point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just the silence right now that you and I are sharing. Is there a non-verbal communication just in that silence?
Yeah.
I'm gonna break the silence, and there's too much silence. So therefore, I need to mansplain. I'm joking, but yeah.
Fortunately, we're not on the radio.
No, we're not on the radio.
Dead air.
And I just think also just sitting in that silence is a communication. I'm not sure that I'm sensing, as I'm sitting in the silence, I'm sensing there is a connection, and we're both sitting here just, are we communicating non-verbally just in this silence?
Constantly.
And,
it's a flow. It's a flow.
And is there in the mind some discomfort for that non-verbal flow, non-conscious flow that's going on tonight?
Yeah, it bubbles up. Yeah.
Bubbles up. And what happens to you when it bubbles up?
Do. What should I do? What next? What should I say next?
And when we don't have an answer, how much more might that facilitate a deeper level of discomfort at a non-verbal level? And is it okay just to say, hey, I don't have an answer right now. I can't answer that.
Yeah.
There's something going on at a deeper level that I've got, I'm experiencing some real discomfort, and it ain't always easy to be in. Well done. Good energy sitting there, mate.
Yeah. All right, what next?
Moving right along, shall we? Let's move out of that non-verbal. But I think you and I sitting in it, just sharing it, in that, I need to own that there is some discomfort in that. There's a comfort, I use the paradox or the irony, comfort within the discomfort. And when I've got comfort within the discomfort, do I then have more choices that you talked about before? Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, Matt.
Yeah.
Well done.
Good talking to you, Mark.
Yeah, likewise. And thank you very much for the non-verbal communication tonight. I think that's really good to mirror that sort of stuff, and just sit that out there as that's communication. Yeah. All right, brother.
All right. Talk to you next week.
Nice talking to you. Look forward to it, mate. Namaste.
Namaste.